Hello, I am Seth Baldwin, and this is my presentation on the sport of wheelchair basketball. So, what is this sport? So, wheelchair basketball is a sport very similar to the original sport of basketball, but this is instead for those who aren't able to compete in stand-up basketball, such as those who obviously, like in the photo, who do not um, cannot play in stand-up basketball. So instead of moving around, pivoting, jumping like in stand-up basketball, wheelchair basketball utilizes a specific wheelchair to move around the court, which is depicted in the photo right here. So where did this wheelchair basketball come from? So the creation of sport was founded out of after World War II due to the increase in war veterans that came with physical disabilities. So as most of them were in with wheelchairs and all that stuff. And so one of the per se the founders is in a sense who guided this evolution was Sir Ludwig Gutmann, and he did this through his organization of the first Stoke Mandeville Wheelchair Games in 1948. This included a wheelchair game that was very similar to wheelchair basketball called wheelchair netball, which netball in the regular sense, it's very similar to basketball as it has a net, but instead it doesn't have a backboard and you can not dribble. And just so it's like a mixture of European handball and basketball put together. But so in this term they made it a wheelchair game, and so wheelchair basketball soon became a part of that. So progression of the sport. So since then, from the wheelchairs in Stoke Mandeville, the wheelchair basketball became one of the 8 sports that kicked off the first Paralympics in 1960 that took place in Rome, Italy. The progression of the sport over the years hasn't really changed as much as, well, it's basketball just with wheelchair. But obviously there's a little more rules to it, but there's not as much rule changes. But other than there's no double dribble and players are not allowed in the key, but that will be covered a little bit in the future here. So how do you play this sport? This sport, it's literally just basketball, but you're wheeling around in a wheelchair. There are like different rule changes, as obviously dribbling is not as easily done as per se as a normal basketball player, but so for one of the rules as going to this is that players must dribble, pass, or shoot the ball after 2 pushes of the wheelchair. So if they're pushing their wheelchair with 2 pushes, they have to either pass it, dribble, or shoot the ball. Another rule is that the players may not touch the court with their feet, so that then that becomes a foul, and which ties into that all the players must be firmly seated in the wheelchair. Offensive players, and then the 4th rule that's pretty different as compared to in stand-up basketball is that offensive players for an inbound play is when the ball is being coming from when it was out of bounds is coming inbound. The offensive players cannot be in the basketball key until the inbounding player is handed the ball by the ref. Then they can. So it's a little different because in basketball you're pretty much allowed to go wherever for the inbounds. So one of the unique features of the sport is the wheelchair that they use. So as you can see, the differences between them from the red wheelchair, which is the one used in wheelchair basketball, as compared to the blue wheelchair, which is just normal, the usual look of a wheelchair. So as you can see between the differences between these two is that the wheelchair basketball has a wider base of support due to the slantedness of the tires. So this helps create so that they can't be tipped over by other players, because it's a very aggressive sport. And so with that, it also, the angle of it is that they can also use that the wheels to bring the basketball up if it's on the ground by pushing the basketball onto the wheel, and then the wheel's momentum of turning will bring it up to them so they can dribble or move around and travel with the ball. As you can see, there's also an extra fifth wheel at the back here. Sometimes they come with two, but in this model it's only one. And that is to keep the player from flipping on the back, which it is kind of like meant for these. If you could see this little bar right here, to prevent the wheelchair from flipping backwards. And I mean, there's still wheelchairs do flip backwards in this game, but it helps prevent that and keep going. The seat is also smaller than the normal wheelchair, and so this, it just brings to be more of not as much comfort, but just to play in. And then the guardrails. So there, as you can see, there's this bended guardrail here in front, so that when because of due to the aggressiveness of the sport, if they collide or anything, then it's just it doesn't injure the players, and it doesn't get them stuck with each other. So, and in the game, they treat it as the wheelchair as an extension of the player's body. So if there's aggressive behavior, and so then if you hit the wheelchair, then it can be called a foul, if depending on the call. So the criteria for playing, there is a very broad classification for those who can play, and it's individuals who cannot participate in the stand-up basketball due to an injury or a disabling condition. So this could include a cerebral palsy, spinal cord disability, an amputee, and other disabilities that affect the function of the lower body. But specifically, they have a classification system to determine how many players are allowed on the court due to a proficiency in sport-specific tests. So this is each team is only allowed a total of 14 points on the court for the 5 players. But this classification system gives a certain number of points that ranges from about 0.5 to 4.5 in such as passing, shooting, rebounding, and dribbling, and pushing as well. And so that if the score is given to that player, and whatever their total score for the 5 players, it has to be either equal to 14 or below 14. So if there's more than 14 for one team, then they either need to substitute players around so that they can get under 14 or exactly 14, or they're going to have to take off a player on the court, but no one wants that because you want more players, obviously. So common strategies that are used in this game. So on offense, a common strategy that is used is called the pick and roll. This is like used also in stand-up basketball, very much so. And it's the same idea, obviously, but so the player, number one, will have the ball. Number one has a defender on them. So player number 5 will use their wheelchair to block the defender on number 1, so that number 1 can go around, and then number 5 can use that pick and, in a sense, roll off that defending player, so they can go to the net to have a scoring opportunity. On defense, it depends on the offensive team, but usually for defense, it's they would like usually the defending team will defend more into the key than rather defend to the 3-point line here, because usually, like, some teams, they could be weak in their shooting, and so if they're weak shooters, then they don't need to worry about the shooting on the 3-point line. Rather, they can just stay closer to the key so they don't allow that attack to the rim for a better scoring chance for the offensive team. But if they're scoring more of if the offensive team is more of a shooting team, then it would be beneficial for the team to play a more man-to-man onto the outside, so they do not shoot as often as they can. So membership, locally, the city of Lethbridge has a Lethbridge wheelchair team called the Lethbridge Steamers, and this is organized by the Lethbridge Wheelchair Basketball Association. They play in a Prairie League that consists of like the west side of Canada, and which then goes to to the national level. But at the international level, Canada also competes in the Paralympics and the World Championships organized by the internet. Well, Canada competes in the Paralympics that is hosted by the Paralympics Committee, and they also compete in the World Championships for wheelchair basketball that is organized by the International Wheelchair Basketball Federation, the IWBF. So how accessible is this sport? So this sport is actually surprisingly very inclusive in the way that all players need to be strapped into a wheelchair. So this levels the playing field for all the individuals, regardless if they have a lower body disability or not, as they can only use their upper body to play basketball, and they have to have the same barrier obstacle that they for wheeling around in a wheelchair, traveling around with also other people, like pretty much bumper carts in a sense, to score a basket instead of using your legs. One of the downfalls, though, of the sport is that the cost of equipment for the wheelchairs is pretty expensive. I've seen that it's around $3,000, like just for one. And now, taking into account that a maximum of 10 players on the court to play this game, well, it just adds up a lot, like $30,000 around there. So that's one of the downfalls. And I mean, the facilities are not a facility is also needed to either rent or to borrow, so it can be pretty pricey. But a video that it's a Guinness beer commercial on how inclusive this sport is, as I'll play it here. I'll just skip to over here where you see all these guys are playing wheelchair basketball, and as you can see, they can't touch the floor with their legs. But as you can see, like, one of them has a lower body, lower body disability, but everybody can be included regardless of if you have a disability or not. And yeah, there's the end of my presentation.